Sylvia and me.
Sylvia and
Sylvia
me.
and me. Sylvia and
Sylvia. Sylvia and me.
Sylvia and me. Sylvia and me.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Beckerman, host of the podcast series Sylvia and Me, conversations with extraordinary, inspiring women.
Hi, I'm Kara Goldin. I'm the founder and CEO of Hint Water and also the author of Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. And I'm excited to be with Sylvia and me today. And thank you for having me.
Kara, thank you so much for being here. I'm delighted to have you here. And yes, you're the CEO and founder of Hint Water. Now, yours came out better than mine, virtual backgrounds and all. As you said, you are the founder and CEO of Hint Water, which I am now repeating, and the author of a brand new book called Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. I want to just go over a little bit more of your background, and then we'll get into flavored water and being an entrepreneur. Okay, so I'm going to read this because I did not remember it. You've received numerous accolades, including being named EY Entrepreneur of the Year 2017, Northern California, one of InStyle's 2019 Badass 50, Fast Company's Most Creative People in Business, WWD Beauty Inc.'s Feel Good Force, and Fortune's Most Powerful Women Entrepreneurs. The Huffington Post has listed you as one of 6 disruptors in business alongside Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. So you haven't really done anything with your life. Kudos.
Thank you.
I'd like to go back a little bit and actually go to when you graduated from college. Hang on, I want to go back a little bit further than that. You're the youngest of 5.
I'm the youngest
Which
of 5.
is funny because I'm the oldest of 5.
Oh, funny.
You have red hair. All of my brothers and sisters had red hair.
That's so funny.
I was the only one who had to pay for my red hair. It's not as red anymore. Seriously.
That's so
and
funny.
You, what I read, which I loved your book, was that as being the youngest, you always had to make more of an effort to be seen. You did more. You were great in sports and so on and so forth. And you went out of your way to do things that maybe a young girl at that, whatever age would not have done. When you graduated from college, you didn't do the normal where a lot of your friends were being recruited. You actually started trying to figure out what would be interesting. You, throughout your childhood, and I'm sure as we go forward, you're very curious. You ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so why don't you tell us, how did you go about getting your first job? Well, I know it wasn't your first job, but your first major job
After college job.
College, yes.
After college job. Yeah. So I was a journalism major and a minor in finance. And I had a lot of friends who were basically going to the Career Resources Center at my school and kind of relying on the companies that came in there. There were a lot of, financial firms that some of my friends were joining. I had a lot of friends who were business majors, and I don't know, nothing just really kind of piqued my interest that was there. And I never really stopped to think that was my only option, that it was just like, go in there and that's how things are done. Instead, one day, I think I just thought about, what do I do every single day? I my friends from college still laugh because I, would read the Wall Street Journal and Fortune magazine whenever it came in. And I would, almost kill my roommates if they threw out a Wall Street Journal, because I was like, I'll catch up on it on the weekend if I don't have time to do it, because I was just really immersed in the learning that I would get out of these, papers, and they weren't interviewing on campus. And so one day I just thought, oh, I'll just send a letter to the editor of Fortune magazine. And I liked the Wall Street Journal, and I still like the Wall Street Journal. I really felt like there were no graphics in the Wall Street Journal at the time. It was very text based. And so I'm a very, like, I love color and I love, the visual side of it. So I think that was a part of the Fortune, pull for me too. But anyway, I wrote a letter to the managing editor, Marshall Loeb, and said, I'd, really love to, come and interview for a job. And I hadn't seen a job listing. I just thought, like, why not? And I got this, what I would later learn was kind of a Dear John letter, basically saying, like, hey, if you're ever in the New York area, girl in Arizona, right? Like, just let me know, and maybe we can, like, have you in for an interview. He didn't think I'd actually show up. And that's when I decided I've got to figure out a way to get to New York, and I might as well, make it worth my time. And that's probably another story, which actually you read in the book, which is, how I went about it and how I decided at that point that I've got to get to New York within the next month, and I might as well have some additional jobs. So I ended up having, by the time I got to New York, I ended up having over 90 job interviews, and 60-ish actual offers for jobs. So, which, as I always say to people, like, no one actually gave me the memo that the year that I graduated was actually a really tough year. We didn't have a pandemic, but it was, like, not the year that everybody was getting jobs. And I just didn't know that. Instead, I just decided, where would just be really, really exciting to work at, that if I got that job, I'd just be, like, over the moon and getting up every single day. And it was Fortune magazine. So when I finally got to New York on my journey, and to interview, I walked into the Time Life building, the Time Inc., empire, which Fortune was part of, on 6th Avenue. And there was no security at the bottom. I marched up to the HR, because of course that's how you get a job. You just go to the HR office. And I can still remember the woman's face who was sitting in the reception area. I said, hi, I'm here to see Marshall Loeb. And I mean, I was, had my suit on and I was all ready to go. And she said, do you have an appointment? And I said, no, but I have this letter. And he said, if you're ever in the New York area. And so that's when she didn't know what to do with me. So she called her manager, and then the manager called her head, and they said, this woman's here from Arizona and she's here. I mean, can you imagine, like, this, 21-year-old showing up? And that's when, the head of HR broke the news to me that he really meant, like, if there was ever a job opening.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, I'm here and I'm going back to Arizona tomorrow, and it'd be really great if maybe, is there something else? And so I ended up interviewing great person who's still a friend of mine, Brooke McMurray. And, she had been looking for an executive assistant for some time. And, I basically thought, if I could just get a job in the building, I mean, that would be amazing. And then maybe eventually I'll get to Fortune magazine. And that never happened. But I think, for me, I always led with, I don't know, like, I was never afraid of failure. I definitely just figured, if nothing else, I'll just go try. I mean, I'd love to just come back to Arizona and say I had 90 interviews and not one actually gave me a job. Instead, like, I had all these stories along the way that I just thought it was hysterical. And,
Well,
people, and I think, like, that's part of
well,
the journey for everyone.
one of the things the reason why I brought this up is because one of the things that you describe is you were offered the job at Time in Manhattan. You'd never been to Manhattan before, other than the one time you were going to go live there. And you had some doubts, which you voiced to your father, who said to you, what is the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
And that is kind of the theme throughout your book, and you going ahead and being able to accomplish what you have. And that's, you thought about what is the worst that could happen? And the worst
Yeah.
was that you took the lease out and so on. So,
Yeah. And he did, he really like laid it down for me. And I've said this over and over again, even in, building my company Hint. I mean, I say to when, managers are trying to make decisions about stuff to do, like, just give me the worst. Like what is the worst? And sometimes when you think about that, it can be financial, it can be, usually it's financial, right? Like that's what it really boils down to,
yes,
I think,
it
in
does.
business or in life. And I think that is where, you know, that is where my head was even back then. And I think it's always an important thing to sort of talk about just in terms of a mindset. When you fear something, right? You think
Oh,
about like, what's the worst that can happen? And, another story in the book that I talk about is how, you know, even when you have that in mind and you plan things out to the best of your ability, and you really figure like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I'm going to do it for, the reasons to, get over your fears of, for me, heights, when I hiked the
oh,
Grand Canyon,
me
and
too.
how, lots of things happened along the way. And it kind of goes for full circle, because instead, where my brain went immediately was all the things that I had been through that really challenged me, that I didn't think I could get through, but I did. Right. And so I talk about, so often I feel like, we're really maybe overly focused on separating your personal from your business life. And I'm always, thinking about those times when I actually got strength from each other, on sort of, kind of untraditional sort of ways of thinking about it. But,
Well,
but
that is one of the things that people don't really understand. And if they step back and see that some of their own personal goals, some of the things like you're afraid of heights, you hiked in the Grand Canyon, those things can then help you on a professional level. And the same
totally,
goes back on a professional level. You can you actually can make a great deal with somebody who you never thought you could approach, and you could then take that into your own personal life and deal with somebody who maybe you don't want in your life anymore, or you've been afraid to approach.
totally.
So what I'd like to do now is go to the creation and the thoughts behind Hint. And I know that you were, I don't know if you want to use the word addicted, but you loved Coca-Cola a lot.
Diet,
Di-
diet.
well, diet,
Yeah.
doesn't diet have all that stuff in it?
Yeah.
All right,
So,
so
and
diet
not,
Coca-Cola. Go ahead.
yeah. And I didn't grow up in the industry. I had never taken a role with any of the, beverage companies that are out there, or food companies. Although I think they did actually come on my campus to interview at one point. But anyway, I really, did, kind of came upon this when I was taking a break after tech. I had built AOL's e-commerce business, the partnerships, um, and had a very successful run there, and had decided to also do something a little bit unconventional, which was take a couple of years off and spend time with my family. And again, maybe it's changed a little bit now, but 20 years ago, I mean, that's just not really what women did either. It's like you get off the track and you're off, right? And I think like for me, I just really wanted to sit back and think a little bit and try and understand what I really wanted to get up and do every single day. And so I was in that process. I was, grocery shopping and deciding to get in shape, and had lost, was really had been working hard for a couple of weeks and trying to lose a lot of the baby weight that I had, consistently gained over the course of having 3 kids. And, I had also developed terrible adult acne. And so for me, like probably the acne was like kind of the final straw where I thought like, what is going on here? I have no idea what's up with it. And also my energy levels were really low. Doctors had really pointed to like hormones and the fact that I was getting older, all things that I was like, it just seemed fuzzy to me that I just didn't really understand it. So that's when I really started reading labels for my food. And no one told me along the way that I should be like looking at what I was drinking. And so it was purely by accident that I, happened to look down. My diet soda can was perfectly facing my way, and I saw the label. And that's when, I was sort of in this mindset and on this journey to kind of read the food ingredients, but not really, the diet soda, because I never really thought there was anything wrong with diet soda because it said diet, right?
Yeah.
And so then I started, yeah.
That's
And
it.
so I started to kind of like question. And then I think somewhere in the process, I almost became a little embarrassed or frustrated by the fact that, I had been marketed to for all these years that, diet means health. And so just as a test, I didn't even really think it was going to work, but I put the diet soda to the side and started drinking water. And then I realized how I never drank water and how, water was like, I aspired to be a water drinker, but I always thought it was really boring. And so that's when, I forced myself for 2.5 weeks. Every day I'd line up 8 glasses on the counter and make sure that I was getting enough water. And then I thought, okay, this like can't be a long-term thing because I just really don't like the taste of water. And so after 2.5 weeks, I lost over 20 pounds. My acne was gone. My energy levels were so much higher. And that's when I really started to realize that like I didn't really know what I was putting in my body. I mean, here I had these young kids under the age of, 4, and I was like being so careful about what I was putting in their own body, but I didn't really stop and actually ever think, about what I was doing to myself. I probably cared more about the oil that I was putting in my car than I was actually putting in me, because I respected these labels and, the fact that diet was like, good for me.
That's the thing. And we do wind up falling into that. And
And
going
I
back to,
felt,
yes, and going back to what you said, your doctors were telling you, oh, it's hormones, it's your age. Those are just typical answers that you
they
go
don't
on.
know.
Nobody questions anything.
Nobody, yeah, nobody questioned it. And so that's when, and I mention all of this because it was like, it was not one specific time. It was like a 2-year journey and that I was going through. And then finally I thought, okay, I'm slicing up fruit and throwing it in water to get myself to drink water. I never looked back on, Diet Coke and drink and what I was doing there. And instead, as I was shopping and kind of living my life and eating and drinking healthier, that's when I realized that all of these things that were calling themselves water, vitamin water was probably the biggest brand out at the
But
time. Like it not only had lots of ingredients very similar to the diet soda that I had been drinking, but it also had like a lot of sugar. There was not even a diet version of it. And I would talk to friends of mine who were drinking that, and they had sort of fallen into this trap too. And so there was just, I almost felt like I was getting a PhD in like vocabulary. And I thought like it's so fascinating how people like at what point, like if you took a vocabulary test at age 7 and you said, you know, that that like water actually has sugar in it, you would fail the test, right? Like it's just, and then somewhere along the way, we've been like, told that it does, like it's okay for that to have. So that was the process that I was going through. And then I kept looking for the product that I wanted, which was fruit and water. And again, I had all kinds of doubts. Like I thought, why is this product has to be out there somewhere? I looked on the West Coast where I was living, on the East Coast, it was nowhere to be found. And then I thought, gosh, while I'm looking for another role, I was getting ready to go back to work. And while I'm looking for that next role, maybe I just like get a product on the shelf at, my local new, great store that I've been shopping at, Whole Foods. And I never even thought of it as a company. I mean, I remember actually thinking about what I was doing as a company when a friend said to me, like, oh, that's so great that you just like launched this company. This, of course, is after I get it on the shelf at Whole Foods. And I'm like, a company? Like I've got like 3 flavors. I'm not really, I mean, it's not a company. I've worked at AOL and CNN and Time. Like I've worked at companies like, and this is just like a product. So I think that that really was driven out of, again, me doubting because I didn't have the experience. I didn't understand the industry. And now, I mean, fast forward 15 years, we're the largest non-alcoholic beverage in the country that doesn't have a relationship with Coke or Pepsi. And I fundamentally believe that the reason why we were able to grow and do what we've done is that I hadn't been classically trained, right? Like I was curious and I was willing to go and try. And, yes, there were a ton of people who wouldn't talk to me. Yes, there were, I have to knock on more doors to, raise money for this crazy idea of being a female. I don't know, because I've never been a man, right? Like I've really, all I know is kind of what my story is along the way. And so, I think the thing that I really wanted to do in writing this book was also to, share with people my story in hopes that it would inspire people to go and just try, right? And
That that's the thing. You had something, you didn't go out to create flavored water. You were
Mhm.
doing it for yourself, and you had one main goal, and that was to not put any sweetener in
Mhm.
it, no sugar, no artificial. You wanted it to be just like when you put a piece of fruit, and you couldn't imagine that it really wasn't out there.
Mhm.
So, what do you say to people? That was your goal. And I know, like in playing golf, I don't play golf, but the whole thing is keep your eye on the ball.
Yeah.
When you're on a boat, know where your feet are. So when you were out there saying this, I'm putting a product on, you didn't realize you were building a company, but this is something that should be there because, hang on one second. What is that? Anyway, um, it was something that you couldn't imagine couldn't be done. No one was going to tell you it couldn't be done. This wasn't a passion of yours to begin with until it was a goal. There are so many people who are told, whatever your passion is, go out for it. You can become an entrepreneur. Just, take your passion. Um, what do you say to people who are being told that, and are trying to do something, but then don't take a look to see, is this out there already? Is it really a product? Because what you have is a product. No
Mhm.
matter how you were building the company, it was a product that there was a need for,
I
which
think
took you a time to figure out that there was a real need for it.
Yeah. Well, I think it also, you touched on this too, that it's for me that the actual product, the water was kind of the vehicle for, this bigger mission. And I had seen that my life was changed by actually, changing this one tiny thing in my life that I had been hooked on. Right. And so it was always about like, I felt really good about the fact that I had been, I had been fixed, right? By like I had woken up to this. And I thought, gosh, there's so many people out there that are suffering from type 2 diabetes or other health issues
Right.
and who, right? And I thought, gosh, this is like if we could actually get them to enjoy water, it may just be the first step for them to actually realize that you actually can do it, right? It may actually, and so when I got it into our first store, which was Whole Foods in San Francisco, I mean, we were hearing from consumers like right away that they like, they we would have a way for them to reach out to us on the bottle, and they would write to us. And of course, it wasn't like there were 10 people, it was me. And, my husband was like joining me because he felt sorry for me because I was the only one doing this. And so he was like, let me figure out a way to help you. And basically, like, the consistent message was, I discovered your product and this really helped me. And I thought, like, I wonder if large, beverage companies, soda companies are getting the same messages. Like, it was just like, whenever somebody says that they discovered something, that to me is just like a really positive thing, right? Like, again, I became obsessed with sort of vocabulary, like people unconsciously kind of talking about things. And maybe it was because I had become really focused on, how I'd been fooled by the word diet. But I think for me, it was just, I thought, gosh, if I could actually like live every single day hearing from consumers, you've really helped me. I mean, who doesn't want to lead a company that people say, you've helped me,
That's right.
right? I mean, it's super powerful. And I thought, and I still hear from consumers like 15 years later, not very often, but some people will be like, I drink water every day. Like, why do I need your product? And I'm like, you probably don't. Right. Like, that's okay too,
Right.
and I said, but obviously there's an industry around diet soda, and there's an industry around these enhanced waters that have sweeteners in it. And they're big business. And unfortunately, like, that is, I mean, that's where the majority of our people come from. And those people are at different moments are tapped by the exact same curiosity that I had, which was, how do I get healthy? And I mean, frankly, we're, recording this during COVID. I mean, I think there's been no better time where everybody's trying to figure out, like, how do I stay healthy? And, and I think a product, like Hint, that is the one positive aspect of this that I've really been able to see, in humanity, which people are waking up and actually and understanding that, that this is what they're putting into their bodies is really, really important. And so anyway, I feel like, that was kind of the epiphany, for me in thinking about this and starting this more than anything was really the customer, early
Yeah.
on, and still to this day. And so I always share with entrepreneurs too, that, figure out a way to get your product to market or your service to market, as cheap as possible. Obviously, if it's in food, as safe as possible, but also know that, if your customer is not interested in your product, you're not really solving a problem for them, then, it's probably not going to be a business, right? That's really needed. And so I don't really think you have to, I think you have to try and get it out there first, because you just don't really know.
Well,
Um,
that's the whole thing. And a lot of people would say, "Oh, flavored water, it's so simple." I mean, nobody would, there's no market for that. Somebody else probably has it. And I think that stops a lot of people from moving forward, because the simplicity of the idea stops them from saying, no, wait, it's okay to be simple. The idea is okay to be simple. Now, mind you, I'm not saying it wasn't difficult for you to figure out how to get it out there with a shelf life that, could be sold the way it's sold. But a lot of people stop themselves from moving forward because they think their idea is too simple.
yeah.
And
Which
ideas don't have to be complex.
I agree. In fact, I think the simpler they are, I mean, and I think that holds true not just for the consumer, but also, if you're raising money. I also, mentor entrepreneurs on this as well, that if there is something in a deck that, even if I'm not in an industry that they're in and I'm reading it and I don't understand it, it's not super simple. I can guarantee you that somebody that you're pitching won't understand it, and they won't give you money.
And they
right?
won't
Like
ask because if they don't, why
and they
should
won't
they?
ask, right?
Because you're
Right.
asking for money. They're not, they
Yeah.
don't need to do that.
And 9 out of 10 times they won't actually tell you that they don't understand. They'll just say, oh, it was a bad idea or whatever. But it's actually like the simpler you can make things. And so, we're constantly, I mean, everything from our graphics to, the word to like, again, I was never classically trained in this stuff. I'm only speaking from my gut and from a consumer and from experience along the way, that I really believe, in simplicity. And I think that it's so important.
Well, one of the things you mentioned slightly before, you guys have had your ups and downs.
Mhm.
Um, During the 2008 financial crisis, it wasn't an easy time then. And when Starbucks, who was one of your largest customers, decided that they were putting in cold food, they needed that shelf space for what they wanted to do, and they had to take out hint.
Yeah.
And one of the things you mentioned that you learned is never put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
So even though, and you're here today to tell the story, um, it's a learning experience.
Yeah. And
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 people
I,
shouldn't be afraid of that.
yeah, and I talk about that. I mean, for the story was, almost 40% of our business was sitting with Starbucks. And it's while on that day, I mean, there were so many lessons when I think back on that, and so many things I didn't do. So many things I did do and so many things I didn't do. But just as an example, I mean, never never put all your eggs in one basket or a majority basket, because
Yes.
it really hurt when it went away. And, while I was angry with, the executive team or Howard Schultz or whoever ultimately like made that decision, he was also making a business decision for his company to actually have higher margin businesses or higher margin products in the case. I didn't love that decision, but he's running his company, I'm running my company, right? And he had to do that, right? And so it took me a little while to grasp that. But what I realized then too is we got a call then from another big Seattle company, that was Amazon, that was launching a grocery program. I can't talk today.
That's right.
And they asked us to be, a part of that the buyer um, was, buying our product from Starbucks. And then, it's almost full circle then, because we were in Starbucks and they kicked us out, but they wouldn't have, the buyer at Amazon wouldn't have actually noticed, us, or maybe he would have known about us, maybe he wouldn't have, but he ended up wanting to do kind of a bigger deal with us because he was buying it in Starbucks every day. We became one of the biggest products in Amazon Prime. And then a year after that, we ended up deciding that we weren't going to get the data that we really wanted about the customer.
Yep.
And so we ended up launching our own program at drinkhint.com, where consumers could buy everything that we do, all 26 flavors. And that was really when, I woke up and I realized that it all went back to Starbucks. And I actually had Howard Schultz to thank for that, right? I didn't love the idea that I was kicked out, but I always talk about, if you look back on when bad things happen, to you, and, there's always lessons, right, along the way that you learn. But in addition to that, did that actually help you to get to the next place? Maybe you get fired from a job, right? And
Mhm.
then you've now got the greatest job. Maybe it's the pandemic and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, I was furloughed, I'm not going to go back. And now I don't know exactly, maybe it was time that you had to like figure out what you really wanted to do. And so I, I think sometimes it's hard when you're in it, and it's always easier to look in the rearview mirror. And but and that was really, the key thing that I felt was really important to tell in these stories, because I think so much of the time entrepreneurism is kind of celebrated, made a lot more glamorous than it really is in every industry. But whenever I look at entrepreneurs, I know that there's some hardships, there's challenges, there's failures along the way. There's times that they doubted it. And, and the most important thing is that they tried and they persevered and they learned from their mistakes and they went back and they own their mistakes too. And I think
That's the thing. If you don't own your mistakes and your faults, you're not going to get anyplace.
yeah.
Um,
And so I think it's lots of lessons there that, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're just a person that is trying to get up in the morning. Like I've heard that from people who have read the book as well, that it's, there's like, I hope people will read it and say, if she can do it, I can do it. Right. Like and that is really, that to me is really, the purpose, right, of writing this.
well, I was going to ask you what the purpose was, but you just said it. So do you consider that also one of the biggest factors in success is being able to move past, problems and errors and catastrophes, and being able to move past it and learn from whatever happened and being able to figure out how to go forward?
I think that the biggest problem that many people have in being able to move forward, and it even comes before fear, is this wall. Like, I mean, how many times do we sit there and, tell ourselves that we can't do something because, we don't have the right education, there aren't any jobs out there. There's a million reasons why we can't do something. And then look at how many times you didn't think you could do something and you actually could if you tried, and you sort of surprised yourself, right? And so that is, oftentimes the thing that I think people need to think about first is, why do I think that I can't do things? I share the story. My niece was a professional soccer player, and I remember when she was, getting really good, and she was in high school, and she had this like block in her head where she couldn't go down one side of the field. And like it was always like really curious, and she just couldn't get there. And she ended up seeing a sports psychologist who actually like helped her to break down that wall. And I think about that story a lot, where how many times do we need to just break down a wall to sort of believe that we can't do something? Maybe it's like we were told that you can't go right too much, right? Or I don't know what it is, right? You won't be able to get a job at Time Magazine if you don't have the right education or whatever. And so I always tell people, like, when I'm out speaking and there's this Q&A where people are saying like, I'm different from you, you're like very confident, and you've never had failures. I often think, to people, and I've actually said this to people, maybe you actually need to actually figure out why you think you can't, because and again, I'm not being sassy, I'm being
No,
like really sincere, right? Because I don't believe that I think that somehow comes into people's journey, and they have to get out of it, right? And they have to break it down or they can't move forward.
that's very true. And people sometimes put their own walls up in front of them without even realizing it. There's so many things that they prevent themselves from doing because of that fear that they don't even realize is there. And until
Yeah,
you can face it, you can't move on. And it could be paralyzing for so
paralyzing.
many. And
And
in,
for
I'm
oh,
sorry.
go ahead. I was just going to say, I mean, just as another example, I mean, the number of people that I know that have all of those credentials that actually don't have like their dreams come true are like a lot, right? And so I think that it's the people that actually go try and are a little bit different and aren't supposed to be here, right? And like they're not supposed to be,
Yeah.
applying for that job, or like everybody's trying to figure it out, right? And I think those are the people, they stand out, right? And I think that you just have to, and I think sometimes it just takes getting back up, right? Too, if you don't get it the first time and you really, really want something, and and you sort of do, forge your own path. I mean, that's how the greatest companies have ultimately been created. And that's something I think about a lot.
Well, we hit upon the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. So many people have lost their jobs, lost good jobs, lost, any kind of income. And a lot of people are leaning towards entrepreneurship without even realizing that this was anything they could do, anything they wanted to do. And a lot more and more women are leaning towards it. So, what is the one piece of advice you would give them if they're just starting out? They sort of maybe have an idea. What should they do?
I think, it's funny that you mentioned this. I had a friend last night who told me that she was laid off, and she sent me a text, and she was asking if I, knew of anything out there. And the first question I asked her, I said, "What do you want to do?" And because she's done a lot of different things, and I said, "What?" And she said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, that's what you have to figure out first." And and I think it's important. And so that's what I ask people all the time. And how you get there, there's a lot of different ways. I mean, you start talking to people, ask people like what you think, ask them what they think you enjoy doing, right? And it'll be really interesting, like what people might say, like and they may be wrong too, but I think it's fascinating, to think like what people ultimately, you know, think you might like if you don't know. It sort of depends on, what drives you, and, and what you feel you need too. And I think like that's the other piece of this too, that is, that is super important. And it's, this book is also being called a bit of a self-help book, because I think a lot of people have read it as well and have said, yes, it is an entrepreneur and it's about her journey, but it's also about, a lot of people close the chapter and say, gosh, like, you know, am I really doing what I want to be doing and what motivates me? And I think pandemics like COVID too sort of help people kind of think about that too. But I
Well, yeah.
feel,
We're all in a place where a lot of people are rethinking what they really want to do with their lives. A lot of
yeah,
people are in a position where, as we talked about, they have been laid off. And then other people are thinking about, well, maybe this is the time for me to really sit back and think, what is it I really want to do?
yeah,
What do I want to accomplish? I also wanted to talk about, it's not just water anymore. You've expanded. And again, it's because of something that you saw as a need,
hmm,
and it kind of melded with the flavor in the water. And the first one is sunscreen. You had an
yeah.
episode where you went to the dermatologist. They found something, and luckily it wasn't cancerous. But you started thinking about what you're putting on your skin.
Yeah. And so that was, I started to get educated about, I'd already been doing hint water, and I started to get educated around products. And then I started to ask myself like why I didn't wear sunscreen on my face. And part of it was just wearing foundation. And, I felt like it's the stuff that was kind of better for me screwed up my makeup. And so I relied on SPF, and did some research around that and saw like that really wasn't what I thought it was, and to the levels that I wanted. And so that's when, I ran across this ingredient called oxybenzone that that actually was approved by the FDA in 1978, even though it was Center for Disease Control actually suggested that it may cause precancer cells to grow. And so it is not available in ingredients outside of the US in most countries. And I started to ask the question, why? Very similar to the process that I went through with Hint Water. And again, I had, a scare around precancer cells on my nose, and I'm very close friends with my dermatologist. And I was just asking her, like, why can't I find a product, a sunscreen that is that smells good? Everything in a dermatology office is unscented. And I said, what's wrong with scent? Like, I like having scent. And then the other piece of it was that it was so expensive. And I thought, even if like I still believe this, even a few years after launching our sunscreen is like an amazing quality product. And it's, less than $20. It's priced very similar to what you would get at a CVS. And it's the same quality that you would get in a dermatologist office for a product that's like $45 to $65. And I just thought, like, the margin that goes into this business for people, like me, who is just trying to stay healthy, is just criminal, right? Like, why can't there be products that are really good and good quality that are, that are priced right? And so when I applied, I made my own sunscreen at home, not even thinking that this was a product that Hint would do. But a friend of mine who used to be in the cosmetics industry said, oh, all sunscreens need FDA approval. And so we applied for FDA approval with the Hint brand, just basically as a placeholder, not thinking like, oh, we can just change the name later or whatever. We got the approval. And I think like the funniest part about it was we launched it on our website, that, was doing pretty well at that point. And the number of consumers that had been drinking Hint water, and we launched a sunscreen, like, I mean, it was, people were like, wait, what? Why are you guys launching a sunscreen? They thought it was crazy, but they thought it was so crazy that they actually bought it. Right. And they were just like, oh yeah, why not? Like, it's less than $20. Why not? And that, combined with the fact that actually two other really key, observations from that I thought were fascinating. The number of like press and beverage companies that were like upset about us like launching. They were like, wait, what's she doing now? Like, this is like, and I just thought, I don't know, like, if we can get a lot of people like recognizing the brand for what it really was meant to be, which is health, right? And helping people get healthy, maybe we just keep it there. And then the other thing that really was surprising to me about launching the sunscreen was we were one of the first brands to call out oxybenzone on the front of the bottle, because again, it was kind of my purpose for actually developing this product. And we put our essences from the water into the sunscreens too. And then sunscreen companies started putting no oxybenzone on the front of their products. And so we would have consumers write to us and like be really agitated by the fact that they were like, do you know that people are copying you? They're writing no oxybenzone on the front. I mean, it's not our brand. It's like, it's our purpose, right? And our reason. And so what I realized is that our mission had always been to help consumers get healthy, but we had also, like, we were helping lead the way for, categories to actually do better for the consumer. And so it's a fascinating, like, not only did I get so excited, in building Hint water, that we were helping consumers, but we also finally were able to turn an industry to say, okay, we need to go and, reformulate our products, because the consumer is seeing that Hint is doing that over there. Little hint, right? That's what entrepreneurs can do, is that they can call attention, to problems, and maybe lead large companies to actually do better. And so that I'm truly proud of.
That's and you continue doing it. We don't have time to go into all of it, but you also have a deodorant, and that has no aluminum, I believe, in it.
Correct.
And that came out of, I think, something that Maria Shriver and Alzheimer's, and you just continue, as you're thinking, you continue researching and just looking. And as you said, your whole mission is healthy lives, healthy living. And
Exactly.
that's exactly what you've done. Your book, Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, that's what it does, because you had a lot of things happen. Things weren't running smoothly, but you consistently found other ways of overcoming whatever needed to be overcome at that particular time.
That's
And
it.
you continue growing.
That's it.
So for anyone who is looking for the book, and I suggest you read it, I know that Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Facebook, and Jamie Dimon, Chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, highly recommend the book. And I would say that, again, it's not just about entrepreneurship, but it's about finding yourself and having that confidence and overcoming some fear. So whether you want to become an entrepreneur, you just want to learn some more about yourself. It is a memoir, but it's also, it's an inspiration, and it's a great story.
Thank
So
you.
I know that for the book, www.drinkhint.com/Sylvia, Sylvia. You get right onto Amazon. And your website is what is the website? Hint.com or drinkhint.com?
Drinkhint.com as well.
Drinkhint.com. Kara, I thank you so much for joining me today. And I think what you have and what you've done is, it's great. It's huge, because it not only helps people on a path of healthy living on something as simple as water with no sugar that tastes like something better than plain water.
I love it.
And the expansion into sunscreen and deodorant, and I know you have the kids packs. It's wonderful.
We just did hand sanitizers too. So
Oh, right. And you also have, I know you have masks out there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Listen, I remember with the names of my children. That's, that to me is great. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You can find us on all of your popular podcast platforms. And of course, our website, sylviame.com. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned.